Hello everyone, this is Mia Vibes. Today I have a very exciting video for you, and we're gonna be talking about how to add vintage vibes to your traveler's notebooks. Guys, I have been watching traveler's notebook videos for a very long time, like since, I'm not one of those OGs, but since like 2015, I think that's when I started watching traveler's notebook videos. And I feel like a lot of people want to incorporate vintage vibes to their traveler's notebooks when they set it up, or even when they use their traveler's notebooks. But I feel like for like a decoration specifically, a lot of people want to add like vintage ephemeras or vintage embellishments and stuff like that to have some pretty things to look at in your traveler's notebooks. So I just got that impression and I started developing my ideas, and I kind of made the like a conclusion that the way I decorate my traveler's notebooks are just a little different from how like other people were decorating their traveler's notebooks in a vintage style. I don't know what it is, but I am just discovering this recently as I have been setting up so many traveler's notebooks recently, and I am having a lot of fun and I'm so passionate about my traveler's notebook recently. So here today I am going to be sharing 10 tips about how we can add extra vintage vibes to your traveler's notebooks. I have these guys here so that I can give you some examples so that you know what exactly I'm talking about, rather than I just give you a list of things that you can do. So I'm going to be showing you some stuff in here, and I'm not saying that I invented all these tips, all these tricks. I'm not saying I invented them. I learned it from other people, and some of them I have been doing this since I was like really young, like back in high school. I already like did something like this, not for traveler's notebooks but for some of my other journals. And also in this video today, I am not exactly talking about how you can make your spread kind of more vintage style. I'm not talking about the spreads or how you decorate the pages. We're gonna be just basically talking about how you set up your accessories or notebooks and stuff like that. So hopefully this is something you are interested in, and let me know if you have any questions. Then let's go into the very first topic that we're going to talk about. The first tip is use craft paper, craft cardstock, or brown wrapping paper if you can. As you can see, I have two craft folders because I just like touching this. I like those better than those zipper pockets, just because the color gives me extra vintage vibes. And also you're seeing the journal cover that I made with the grocery store bag, which is a brown wrapping paper. Brown papers are easy to find, so when you use those, they are super Instagram friendly and they just look good in a lot of pictures. And also I think it feels great to touch those as well. And I like keeping little craft cardstock pieces here and there so that I can use it for something. And also I even use brown papers as insert pages as well sometimes. Tip number 2 is use a vintage style label maker. Mine is called Dymo, and these are the little labels that you see throughout my traveler's notebooks. Recently I've been just labeling everything and I really like the look of it. Of course sometimes the digital ones are more convenient to use, but they don't have the vintage vibes that I want. I got mine from Amazon a couple years ago and it's broken, and also people say it breaks a lot and everything if you look at the reviews, but I still love using this. And even though I have to sometimes struggle, I still love printing words here and use this in the journals or in the ephemeras and stuff like that. So if you use those, it's just really easy to add the vintage vibes. Tip number 3 is use your imperfect pieces to decorate your traveler's notebooks. As you can see, these stickers that you're looking at right now, these are from my Walmart grocery deliveries. So they just put that on the bag, but I just took them out and I decided to use it to decorate my traveler's notebooks, even though they were not brand new and they were ripped and everything. And also those fabric stickers that you saw, they were just messed up ones from my shop Feel Good parcel. I just had the leftovers and I decided to use those to decorate the traveler's notebooks, even though their shapes and everything is not perfect. And in my pocket size traveler's notebook, there are some typos that I made with the Dymo label maker that I just showed you, but I still use this. I didn't waste it. I think it's just something a little more interesting about my traveler's notebook. And here you see a little piece of plastic bag under the sticker also. Tip number 4 is use fabric. They can be found easily online from eBay, from AliExpress or Amazon. You can search fabric scraps or fabric samples. Then you should be able to get a variety of patterns in one order. You can easily find them, or you can definitely go to the not the thrift store. Yeah, you can go to the thrift store or the craft store also. And this little folder thing is something I made recently with the sewing machine. It's so small, too small for my notebook, but I decided to just keep it as a folder. And also I made a notebook cover with some fabric recently as well. So using fabric is really fun, especially if you have really interesting or vintage pattern. It can give a lot of vintage vibes to your traveler's notebooks. Tip number 5 is glue down your ephemera in your notebook in a way that kind of sticks out of the page. It's really difficult to explain, so I am going to show you how I do it in a little bit. As you can see, like all my junk journals or all my inserts, you always see some like a little paper scraps here and there sticking out. They are not inside the notebook completely, but you can see it when the notebook or the traveler's notebook is like completely closed, because it's just how I glue things down. Of course, I make journal pages that way as well, so that even when you close it, you can kind of see some paper, like the pages inside. So I always try to make sure when I glue down a piece of paper scrap in my journals, I try to see if I can make it kind of stick it out in an interesting way. That way when the notebook's closed or when you're just flipping through, you just have so much textures that you can touch and see. And here I'm quickly showing you how I am like ripping a random piece of paper, which happened to be a brown paper, because that's just something I found on my desk. So I'm ripping this paper now, and I'm gonna just glue it down to my traveler's notebook page real quick, so that I can create like a little tab. They are not exactly tabs. The difference is you don't really use these sticking out papers to find something. They're just there for the look. That's the only, for me at least, that's the only purpose for these little pieces that I put down here like this. So I just make sure that it's sticking out not too much, because when it's sticking out too much, it doesn't look natural. It looks like you are trying hard, and we don't want to look like a try hard for anything, right? I learned this word try hard from my video games. But anyway, I am right now out of the frames, struggling with my label maker that I was showing you earlier. I'm just trying to use that piece that I made earlier into my journal spread real quick. So here I'm just putting it down. It has a really sticky back, by the way, if you were wondering. They work on fabric and a lot of surfaces actually, because they are supposed to be label maker, so I use it on my bookshelf also, by the way. And when you close it, you can see the exact piece that I just put down, just a little bit, tiny little bit, not too much. This is something I enjoy doing so much, and probably you have seen it throughout all my journals. Tip number 6 is don't be afraid to be imperfect. Of course, this goes for the decorations, which I was mentioning earlier in tip number 3. You can use imperfect pieces, but this one is specifically about for those who make their own traveler's notebook inserts. I used to try so hard to be neat or anything like that, but as you can see right now, my corner rounding is terrible in this traveler's notebook that I made. But I don't care because this is my traveler's notebook. I don't want everything to look perfect anyway, because that's impossible. But I always use covers or pages that are kind of like a junk, or maybe I experiment, like just like this cover that I'm showing you right now. I experimented with my sewing machine to make this cover. I wanted to see how the fabric gets sewn on the paper, and it wasn't pretty at all, but I decided to still use it. And also, even this cover, you can see that the paper that I use as a base paper for the cover sticks out. It doesn't get covered completely with that brown paper, but I think it's still fine. And I even use like a really junky pages also. Tip number 7 is use ink and paints. Of course, it's all up to you how you use them, but personally I believe that the inks and paints are like, they can add some other dimensions that printed materials cannot really show. So here I use the gouache paint on my field notes cover. Even though I don't know how to paint, I just decided to use it right there. And also, depending on what kind of design you have for your rubber stamps, you can you can create a lot of vintage looks. Here I just randomly stamped Feel Good Parser stamps, and also on this cover that you're looking at, I even have this stamps on the fabric also. But I'm not afraid. I'm gonna try everything. I'm gonna experiment everything. That's just what I've been doing. I think it just looks more vintage when I add this kind of inks and paints, especially as you can see right now, after the watercolors dried on the pages, when you look at it from the side, the look is just so priceless. Tip number 8 is make it personal. Here, of course, it's for the decorations that you add to your traveler's notebook, but also what I really meant here is that make sure your notebooks in the traveler's notebook work out for you. Make sure that you can use them with a specific purpose. Labeling is a great way to kind of set up that kind of system. So find the specific reasons for each notebook that you have in your traveler's notebook, and make sure you're gonna be filling those notebooks in, because otherwise, after you set it up beautifully and perfectly, it's gonna be just a brand new notebook because you're not gonna be able to fill it up or use it. That means it can't get personal. If it's not personal, then your traveler's notebook just ends up being a whole bunch of like notebooks set up and everything with some vintage embellishments or like a decorations. You don't want that. You want a working traveler's notebook with good vintage vibes. And also, of course, when you use it more, that kind of like a wear and tear and the personal touches that you add to your traveler's notebooks, that's what really gives your traveler's notebook a vintage vibes. So you should definitely keep that in mind. Tip number 9 is use vintage style accessories. If you can really get like a vintage items, like a vintage stationery items or charms, that's awesome to add that to your traveler's notebook. But since we can't really always find all the vintage items, my suggestion would be just add little beads, little charms, little paper clips here and there. You can of course look at the patterns if those items have any patterns, or you can look at the material or the colors and everything. All this kind of accessories, depending on how you pick it. My personal preference is like a black and gold if I can find it, because I feel like they just add a lot of vintage vibes to my traveler's notebooks. And I had a broken bracelet once, so I used the charms from the bracelet to make the bookmark beads or little charms on my traveler's notebook as well. Guys, we are at the tip number 10 here. My last tip for you is use recycled materials. This is the most important thing. I think this is what really makes my traveler's notebooks like super vintage. This cover that you're looking at right now, it used to be an old book, like a music sheet book cover, but I decided to make a traveler's notebook cover with that. And all these pages that I used, of course I love make junk journals, so I just recycled random materials that I had. I used grocery bags, I used random cardstocks that I get from like products that I buy, and all these kind of little things. It's good for the earth, and also it's good for the vintage vibes in your traveler's notebook as well. So guys, this is the end of the video. I just showed you 10 tips about how you can add some vintage vibes to your traveler's notebooks. It's just easy and simple tips that I learned throughout the years, but I just decided to put them all together so you can look at everything in just one video. I hope that this video inspired you anyway, and if you try this any of these things yourself inspired by this video, tag me on Instagram at Mia Vibes, or if you leave a link to a video or something in the description box, I'll definitely check it out. And I hope you have a good day. I will talk to you in my next video, guys. Bye. Happy journaling.